Hey there, everyone. This is Miss G. I had a few students request if I could make a video reading chapter 10 of Frankenstein. Maybe it was a more difficult chapter, you were having trouble understanding it, so that is what this video is. It's just a little extra video for you. So before I read, I like to make this a little bit more zoomed in and get rid of the top bar there, just so I can see more of the text in front of me. So chapter 10, we had just read this, I think I read chapter 6 with you guys, five. We read a summary of 6. You read 7, and then we read 8 and 9 are the summaries. I think I might be wrong about that. Or I think I read chapter 7, and we read 8 and 9 as a summary. So Victor's 6-year-old brother had been murdered. He was strangled. Victor is sure that it was the creature. He saw him like off in the mountains by light, like he saw lightning strike. But unfortunately, an innocent girl named Justine, who their family had taken in, was framed for the murder. I'm sorry, my dog is making weird noises. Stop it. Stop. And now Victor, he's gone into a deep depression. He's attempted or considered suicide, but now he's trying to take care of himself, and he's going on hikes just to kind of, take care of his mental health. So now he's going on a hike in the mountains, and we're beginning chapter 10. I'm going to yawn first. Oh, okay. It was nearly noon when I arrived at the top of the ascent. For some time I sat upon the rock that overlooks the sea of ice. Okay, it was nearly noon when I arrived at the top of the ascent. For some time I sat upon the rock that overlooks the sea of ice. A mist covered both that and the surrounding mountains. Presently a breeze dissipated the cloud, and I descended from upon the glacier. The surface is very uneven, rising like the waves of a troubled sea, descending low and interspersed by rifts that sink deep. The field of ice is almost a league in width, about a mile, but I spent nearly 2 hours crossing it. The opposite mountain, in a bare perpendicular rock, there is a bare and perpendicular rock. From the side where I now stood, Montevert was exactly the opposite, at the distance of a league, and above it rose Mount Blanc in awful majesty. I remained in a recess of the rock, gazing on this wonderful and stupendous scene. The sea, or rather the vast river of ice, wound among its dependent mountains, whose aerial summits, or heavenly of the sky summits, hung over its recesses. Their icy and glittery peaks shone in the sunlight over the clouds. My heart, which was before sorrowful, now swelled with something like joy. I exclaimed, "Wandering spirits, if indeed you wander, and do not rest in your narrow beds, allow me this faint happiness, or take me as your companion, far away from the joys of life." So really he's just describing the beautiful scenery, the icy mountains. It took him 2 hours to cross it, and now he's just kind of yelling out in joy. He just is finally experiencing some happiness as he's in nature. As I said this, I suddenly beheld the figure of a man at some distance, advancing towards me with superhuman speed. He bounded over the crevices in the ice, among which I had walked with caution. His stature also, as he approached, seemed to exceed that of a man. I was troubled. A mist came over my eyes, and I felt a faintness seize me. But I was quickly restored by the cold gale of the mountains. I perceived as the shape came nearer, sight tremendous and abhorred, or hated, despised, that it was the wretch whom I had created. I trembled with rage and horror, resolving to wait his approach and then close with him in mortal combat. He approached, his countenance or his face bespoke bitter anguish, combined with disdain and malignity. So he's both in anguish, but he's also angry, while its unearthly ugliness rendered it almost too horrible for human eyes. But I scarcely observed this. Rage and hatred had at first deprived me of utterance, so he wasn't able to speak, and I recovered only to overwhelm him with words expressive of furious detestation and contempt. "Devil!" I exclaimed, "do you dare approach me? And do you not fear the fierce vengeance of my arm wreaked on your miserable head? Begone, vile insect, or rather stay, that I may trample you to dust. And oh, that I could, with the extinction of your miserable existence, restore those victims who you so diabolically murdered." "I expected this reception," said the demon. "All men hate the wretched. How then must I be hated, who am miserable beyond all living things? Yet you, my creator, detest and spurn or reject me, your creature, to whom you are bound or thou art bound by ties only dissoluble by the annihilation of one of us. You propose, your purpose is to kill me. How dare you sport thus with life? Do your duty towards me, and I will do mine towards you and the rest of mankind. If you will comply with my conditions, I will leave them and you at peace. But if you refuse, I will gut and maw the maw of death until it be satiated with the blood of your remaining friends. Oof, so the creature approaches him. He's utterly abhorred. He says that he had superhuman speed. Um, he ran across the ice that took him hours to do. He wants to basically fight him to the death. And I think if you're highlighting phrases for tone, I think this whole speech has lots of good words of you miserable, vile insect, fierce vengeance, trample you to dust, miserable existence, diabolically murdered. I think all of that could be good examples for the tone of this passage, right? It's very agitated, very contemptuous, or just lots of hatred and anger towards each other. The creature says that if you do your duty towards me, I will do mine towards you, and I will rest in the rest of mankind. So if you listen to me, I will leave you and all of mankind at peace. If you don't listen to me, I will not be. I will be satiated with the blood of your remaining friends. He says abhorred, which I think also that's a great phrase for the tone. Satiated, or just completely full with the blood of your remaining friends. Abhorred monster, fiend that thou art, the tortures of hell are too mild a vengeance for thy crimes. Wretched devil, you approach me with your creation. Come on, then, that I may extinguish the spark that I so negligently bestowed. Negligently meaning without care, so I wasn't thinking when I gave you life, and now I want to take it away. My rage was without bounds. I sprang on him, impelled by all the feelings which can arm one being against the existence of another. He easily escaped me and said, Be calm. I entreat or beg you to hear me before you give vent to your hatred on my devoted head. Have I not suffered enough that you seek to increase my misery? Life, although it may only be an accumulation of anguish, is dear to me, and I will defend it. So even though my life's so miserable, I'm still gonna protect myself. Remember, thou hast made me more powerful than thyself. My height is superior to thine, my joints more supple and more flexible. But I will not be tempted to set myself in opposition to thee. I am thy creature, and I will be even mild and docile to my natural lord and king, if thou wilt also perform thy part, and which thou owest me. O Frankenstein, be not equitable to every other, and trample upon me alone, to whom thy justice and even thy mercy and affection is most due. So basically, he's just kind of telling him, first of all, not a great idea to attack me. If you remember, you made me more powerful than you. I'm taller than you. My joints are stronger than you. And he says, I'm not going to attack you, okay? I'm your creature, and I will be docile, and I will be mild towards you. But he says, you kind of owe me some kindness. You literally made me, and you owe me some kind of justice or mercy. Remember that I am your creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel, whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed. Everywhere I see bliss, from which I alone am irrecoverably or without fail excluded. I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous. So I think here, if you're following along in your packet for chapter 10, what deal does the creature try to make with Victor? Basically, he says, if you listen to me, I will leave you and mankind forever. If you don't listen to me, then I will murder all your friends. And he says, what has made him a fiend? And we just read right there that he said misery has made him a fiend. And fiend, we go down here to see it means a demon. So he's kind of saying, I was supposed to be your Adam. Remember, Adam was the first man that God created according to the biblical story. I was supposed to be like your first creation, but instead I've become the fallen angel, which is another way to just say Satan. But he says, I was happy, but misery, I was benevolent good, but misery made me this demon. If you listen to me, I may again be good. But he says, Begone, I will not hear you. There can be no community between you and me. We are enemies. Begone, or let us try our strength in a fight to which one must fall. So I'm going to highlight that as another example of some of the tone that we're enemies. So there's this, like I said, agitated, hateful kind of tone back and forth, very oppositional. Excuse me. So the creature replies, "How can I move you? Will no entreaties or begging cause you to turn a favorable eye upon your creature, who implores your goodness and compassion? Believe me, Frankenstein, I was benevolent, I was good. My soul glowed with love and humanity. But I am not alone. But am I not alone, miserably alone? You, my creator, abhor or detest me. What hope can I gather from your fellow creatures who owe me nothing? They spurn or reject and hate me. The desert mountains and dreary glaciers are my refuge. I have wandered here many days. The caves of ice, which I only do not fear, are a dwelling to me, and the only one which man does not grudge. These black skies I hail, for they are kinder to me than your fellow beings. If the multitude of mankind knew of my existence, they would do as you do and arm themselves for my destruction. Shall I not then hate them who abhor or detest or hate me? I will keep no terms with my enemies. I am miserable, and they shall share my wretchedness. Yet it is your power to recompense me, or to compensate, or to make amends with me, and deliver them from an evil which it only remains for you to make so great, that not only you and your family, but thousands of others shall be swallowed up in the whirlwinds of my rage." So it seems like the creature has definitely experienced people be really awful to him so far. We don't know his story yet, but he says that men have just rejected and hated him, and that he's miserable. But he says it's in your power to deliver the rest of humanity from my evil. Not just your family, but he says, but thousands of others shall be swallowed up in the whirlwinds of my rage. So if you don't listen to me, not just your family, but I will kill thousands of others. Let your compassion be moved, and do not disdain me. Listen to my tale. When you have heard that, abandon or commiserate me, so either leave me or help me, as you shall judge that I deserve. But hear me. The guilty are allowed by human laws, bloody as they are, to speak in their own defense before they are condemned. Listen to me, Frankenstein. You accuse me of murder, and yet you would, with a satisfied conscience, destroy your own creature. So you accuse me of murder, but you're eager to murder me. Oh, praise the eternal justice of man. Yet I ask you not to spare me. Listen to me, and then, if you can, and if you will, destroy the work of your hands. So you can kill me after you've at least listened to my story. I'm trying to see if this was one of our questions. So that's kind of what rests on Victor now, is the fate of thousands of people, of humanity. That if he listens to the creature, he can save his family and thousands of others from his rage. And if he doesn't, then he's guilty for their crimes, for their murder. "Why do you call to my remembrance," I rejoined, "circumstances of which I shudder to reflect, that I have been the miserable origin and author?" So he's like, don't remind me that I created you. I try to forget that. "Cursed be the day, abhorred devil, in which you first saw light. Cursed, although I curse myself, be the hands that formed you. You have made me wretched beyond expression. You have left no power to consider whether I am just to you or not. Begone, relieve me from the sight of your detested form." "Thus I relieve thee, my creator, so I will leave you," he said, and placed his hated hands before my eyes, which I flung from me with violence. "Thus I take from thee a sight which you abhor. Still you can't listen to me and grant me your compassion. By the virtues that I once possessed, I demand this from you. Hear my tale. It is long and strange, and the temperature of this place is not fitting for your fine sensations. So my story is really long, and you're not going to survive in the cold up here for that long. So come to my hut up in the mountain. The sun is yet high in the heavens. Before it descends to hide itself beyond your snowy precipices and illuminate another world, you will have heard my story and can decide. So before it's already late now, but before the sun rises, you will have heard my story and you can decide if you're going to help me. On you it rests whether I quit forever the neighborhood of man and lead a harmless life, or become the scourge of your fellow creatures and the author of your own speedy ruin." So here's really concisely what he says rests on Victor. So the question here, what rests on him now? It says whether he quits the neighborhood of man and leads a harmless life, or becomes the scourge or the hatred of your fellow creatures. As he said this, he led the way across the ice. I followed. My heart was full, and I did not answer him. But as I proceeded, I weighed the various arguments that he had used and determined at least to listen to his tale. I was partly urged by curiosity, and compassion confirmed my resolution. I'd hitherto supposed, so I had before this supposed him to be the murderer of my brother, and I eagerly sought a confirmation or denial on this opinion. For the first time, also, I felt what the duties of a creator towards his creature were, and that I ought to render him happy before I complained of his wickedness. These motives urged me to comply with his demand. So it says these motives, and I believe the question is, what motives urged him? And so he had just listed them. He said that he was urged by curiosity, he had some compassion. He thought he was the murderer. He suspects he's the murderer of his brother, but he wants confirmation or denial. So he wants to find out for sure if he killed his brother. And he feels some kind of duty towards his creature. Like, okay, I did create this thing. I guess the least I can do is hear him out. So here's the motives. We crossed the ice, therefore, and ascended the opposite rock. The air was cold. The rain again began to descend. We entered the hut, the fiend with an air of exultation or just relief, I with a heavy heart and depressed spirits. But I consented to listen, and seating myself by the fire, which was odious or hateful, my hateful companion had lighted, he thus began his tale. So I think even just saying my odious companion is even more words to describe his tone as just kind of being oppositional, hate filled, contemptuous, agitated, um, violent, even. They want to fight each other. Lots of words like spurn, reject, fiend, devil. So I think if you satiated with blood, vile insect, right? So if you're looking through some of these charged words to kind of figure out the tone of the passage, that should help you talk about your focus skill, which is in a full paragraph to first identify the tone and then analyze how she creates that tone, which you can really just say, through what words does she use that creates that tone, and how do those words make the reader feel in response? And I think we answered all the questions, and that's pretty much it. There's another video of me reading chapter 11 for lesson 6, so if you want to use that, go ahead. If not, reach out with any questions.